A reading from John, chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, and also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another."
Years ago, when I was living in San Diego, I was having lunch with a friend in an outdoor courtyard when I spotted a man walking furtively from table to table. With his long, matted hair and threadbare clothes and soiled, bare feet, he approached at least a dozen people asking for food, only to be repeatedly denied. As he worked his way through the crowded courtyard, I thought about what I might do if he happened to make it all the way to my table. I was, after all, trying to enjoy a nice lunch with a friend I hadn't seen in months, and drifters in this beach town were so abundant that it was nearly impossible to get through a day without being approached for a handout. But before the choice was forced upon me, the man stopped at the table next to ours and made his pitch to two women browsing their menus. I watched casually, expecting them to immediately shake their heads and turn their gaze from him, as everyone before had done. But instead, one of the women promptly stood up and pulled up an empty chair and invited the man to sit down with them. Without hesitation, the other woman handed him a menu, and over the next 30 minutes, the three ordered their meals and ate and chatted with one another. I had planned that afternoon to enjoy an overdue lunch with a good friend, but instead, I found myself sitting there awe-stricken, unable to take my eyes off these two women and their improbable guest as they shared a meal together under the brilliant San Diego sun. We are exploring some key questions here in this series to help us reflect and to think about at the end of each day. Let's reflect on the events and the encounters, the emotions of our day. Where did God show up in my life? How did I show up for others? When did I feel the call of God today? And how did I respond? And what can I learn from today about how I can do better tomorrow? How often do we race through our day at such breakneck speed, only by the end of the day to fall into our beds so physically drained and emotionally weary that we miss such quiet opportunities to reflect on our days, to see what we have made of them and what they have made of us? How often does it happen that today blurs into tomorrow over and again until it starts to feel like every today is just like yesterday, and we're just repeating the same old story, absent of gratitude and wonder and novelty? The late John O'Donohue gave some advice for living. He said, "Walk around feeling like a leaf. Know you could tumble any second. Then decide what to do with your time." But it's hard to live with such self-awareness unless we take time to pause and remind ourselves of our leafiness, if you will, our fragility and impermanence and the tumble that awaits all of us. How is it that two women sitting at a table in a courtyard together do not hesitate in that moment to offer time and space to a drifter over lunch? What did they see? What did they know that the other guests did not? Perhaps the answer is found somewhere in this question we can ask ourselves at the end of each day. Have the eyes of my heart beheld the divine image in others today? Maybe what those women saw that no one else saw that day was the image of God, disguised in the face of a drifter. How do we see and recognize the image of God in all others? Maybe it begins by affirming that the face of God is found in the face of everyone. Sometimes, for whatever reason, that image of God is hard for us to see. It can be hidden or buried deeply within a person. It can be disfigured by what that person has done or what they've done to themselves. It can be disguised by fear, hubris, hatred, or some persona or social mask that a person takes upon themselves. It can be marred by shame or pride, need or want, wealth or poverty. But the face of God, the divine image, is found in everyone. And to behold it, we must know how and where to look for it, and must have the eyes of love to recognize it. Perhaps one surefire way to see and recognize that image is to look for it in the faces of those whom Jesus once described as the least of these, the poor, hungry, naked, sick, and imprisoned. In Matthew 25, Jesus makes it absolutely clear to us there is no mystery for where to find God, and no excuse for not recognizing the divine image in people. Jesus famously tells us that whenever we encounter, quote, the least of these, it is plain and simple Jesus in disguise. And that, as he said, whatever we do for one of the least of these, we do it to him. If at the end of the day we wonder if we beheld the face of God today, we can ask ourselves, when and where did I encounter the least of these, and how did I respond? The truth is that whenever we do encounter the least of these, it's not actually very hard to love them if we're really paying attention and if we have empathy. Deeply ingrained in the human moral conscience is a rule of life that's about 8,000 years old. Christians refer to it as the Golden Rule, but it predates Christianity. It's as old as Confucius. It's observed by at least 13 world religions. In its various forms, it says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. On 3 occasions in the Gospels, Jesus teaches his followers to practice the Golden Rule by treating others as we would want them to treat us, by loving our neighbor, as he said, as we love ourselves. There's nothing uniquely Christian about the Golden Rule. It's a universal code of ethics, and it's based on this principle of reciprocity. It suggests that we should take a walk around the block in our neighbor's shoes and imagine if we were that neighbor, how it might feel to be them, how we would want to be treated. It doesn't require us to wear our neighbor's shoes forever, or to take on their burden entirely, or to walk for them. It simply means seeing the neighbor as we see ourselves, as a child of God, worthy of love, and then to act empathetically toward them and with mercy and kindness. It's called the Golden Rule, and whenever we practice it, it actually feels pretty good. And this is another way to tell if we've beheld the image of God in others. You'll know it because you actually feel it in your body. All the science suggests that when we help the least of these, it evokes positive feelings of well-being in us. It's physically and emotionally good for us. When we help others, our bodies release endorphins, our brains release oxytocin, feel-good hormones that reduce pain, increase feelings of euphoria and happiness, generosity and fulfillment. Have you ever helped someone whom you might describe as one of the least of these and found yourself saying afterward, I think they helped me as much as I helped them? The brilliant film Precious from years ago captured the power of this empathetic golden rule kind of love that honors the divine image in others. In the film, Clarice Precious Jones is an obese Harlem teenager She's pregnant after having been assaulted by her mother's boyfriend, who is her father. Her life has been filled with unrelenting abuse since childhood, and because of her appearance, she is rejected by almost everyone. Her world is bereft of beauty and kindness, utterly loveless. Expelled from school because she's pregnant a second time, she finds herself at a special school with an extraordinary teacher who slowly, patiently draws her out. In one memorable scene, the teacher asks her students to journal about their lives, but Precious can't bring herself to do it. The only words she can write are, "Why me?" The teacher persists. Whatever it is, it's important, she says, and Precious, who has just learned that she's HIV positive, finally breaks down and weeps, gives a confession that reveals a spirit totally devoid of self-worth. She says, "Nobody cares. Nobody loves me. Nobody has ever loved me." And that teacher kneels at her desk and says, "That is not true. Your baby loves you. I love you." And those words spark a change in Precious. Her life, her light, slowly, steadily return. At the end of the day, we might ask ourselves, have the eyes of my heart beheld the divine image in others? Empathetic love, it recognizes and restores the divine image in the other. Jesus tells us we can start by looking for that image in the least of these, and we'll know when we've honored that image because we will feel it in our bodies. There's another kind of love, a more challenging kind of love that's required of us to behold the divine image in some people. The least of these may move us deeply at an empathetic level, but there are some people in the world who are just really hard to love. Perhaps we feel no empathy for them at all. Can you think for a moment of someone right now that you find difficult to love? Someone in whom you just cannot see the divine image? It's okay. You can admit it. For all of us, there are certain people we find difficult to love: a neighbor, a colleague, a classmate, a friend of a friend, a politician, maybe a member of your own family. They're the kind of people you find not only unlikable, as in you don't want to share the same airspace with them, but unlovable, as in you'd prefer not to share the same planet with them. For whatever reason, they just get under your skin. They rub you the wrong way. You can't trust them. They represent a perspective, position, an agenda you find disagreeable. If you can't think of someone, you probably haven't thought long and hard enough. How did that old Depeche Mode song put it? People are people, so why should it be that you and I should get along so awfully? We're talking about that kind of person. The kind of person who, when we replay the tapes at the end of the day and reflect on the day we just lived through, we might find ourselves ruminating over. Here's where the golden rule doesn't seem to work for us, because it's hard to feel empathy for them. You can't bring yourself to walk around in their shoes because their shoes just stink. Sometimes we need another way to see and recognize the divine image in others, and Jesus gives us that way in the form of a commandment in today's passage. Commandments do not care about our empathy or about how we feel about others in the moment. Commandments are directives of the will. And in today's passage from John, Jesus gives us what he calls a new commandment, a radically new rule of life, if you will, that transcends the golden rule. I like to call it the titanium rule because, like the strongest of metals, it's the strongest and most enduring form of love. Jesus sums up the titanium rule this way: He says, love one another as I have loved you. Sometimes we cannot see and love others through the lens of empathetic love. Sometimes we must look beyond or behind the deeply flawed image of a person to recognize the divine image, which is often buried or disguised by behaviors or attitudes or masks we find unlovable. And this is where we need the titanium rule to guide our encounters. It may be the only way sometimes to see the divine in the other, to love not how we would want to be loved, but by how Jesus loves us, without condition, without condescension, and without condemnation. Jesus gives this teaching about titanium love in one of the most tender and vulnerable moments of his life. In the story, Jesus is about to be arrested and tried and crucified, and two of his close friends will play key roles in that tragedy. Judas will betray him by handing him over to the authorities. Peter will deny ever knowing Jesus before the night is over. Both are with him that night in that room. And yet instead of cutting them off that night, Jesus loves them. The most difficult people to love in his most challenging moment. He sees and recognizes even in them the divine image, despite what they soon will do to him. It is a reminder that at the end of the day, there are people in our lives whose behaviors we may find inexcusable, but whose sacred worth is irrevocable. Liking them is not optional, or is optional, but the titanium rule says that loving them is not optional. As the activist Sister Helen Prejean says, a person is more than the worst thing he's ever done. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a manifesto for practicing this titanium love. Letter from a Birmingham jail was a response to the accusation that the civil rights movement was a movement of extremists. King's opponents had accused him of being a radical. They said he wasn't moderate enough, that his message was outside the principles of popular opinion. Instead of denying that accusation, King embraced it. And he said, the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? And King then pointed to Jesus as his inspiration and guide. He wrote, in that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified. All 3 were crucified for the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists, he said, for immorality. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love and truth and goodness. What does it mean to be an extremist for love? It's to fulfill this new commandment, love one another as I have loved you. Liking some people may be optional, but the titanium rule says that loving them is not. Anne Lamott wrote years ago about buying a roll of carpet for her church nursery school class, only to discover once she unrolled it that there was a large moldy stain right in the middle of it. She attempted to return it, but the carpet guy, as she called him, became belligerent. So over several days, she harassed him on numerous occasions until the carpet guy caved. But when he finally wrote her a refund check, the check bounced at the bank. Lamott was furious. She was preparing for an all-out war with the carpet guy. But then something happened. Standing outside the bank, she started to laugh. She said that deep inside, she felt that she got it, although she couldn't quite say what she got. She says, I didn't get the release I'd been expecting, when a wrong has been righted, but I got something better. I stopped hating myself. She said the carpet guy had cheated me, but he was also an innocent bystander in a very old story. He was the smudged ledger inside of me every time I'd been humiliated and stiffed. She felt God's nudge to buy a bouquet of daisies for the carpet man, and she wrote him a note. Here is your check back. I'm very sorry for the way I behaved. The carpet store was closed, so she tied the daisies to the doorknob and dropped the check and her note through the mail slot. Later, she called him. He answered. I got your letter, he said. That was a decent thing. And just as she began to savor his words, he added, but you behaved badly. I behaved badly? The rage started up in her again, but this time it didn't take over because something got there first. She writes, you want to know how big God's love is? The answer is very big. It's bigger than you're comfortable with. And so she said to the carpet guy who told her that she behaved badly, she said, yes, I know. Have the eyes of my heart beheld the divine image in others today? Because it can be very hard to do so, we ask ourselves, did I remember that the face of God is found in the face of everyone? Did I do to others as I would have them do to me? Did I love others as Jesus has loved me?